Welcome to Dreamcatchers, where we share the journey of your dreams. Our guest today is Gautam Narula, author of the book Remain Free. This is a very personal story of his friendship with Troy Anthony Davis, who, as many of us know, was one of the world's most famous death row inmates. A black man accused of murdering a white police officer, Mark Maffei, in cold blood. Despite worldwide protests and belief by many in his innocence, he was executed by the state of Georgia on September 21st, 2011. So let us talk to Gautam and find out why he wrote this book and why writing this book was a dream for him. Gautam, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Okay, so tell us why you wrote this book.
There was a lot about Troy's story that's still relevant today. There are still people on death row who may be executed innocent. Between 2011, when Troy was executed, and today, over a dozen inmates have been exonerated from death row because they were innocent. And those are only the people we know about. There may be other innocent people who have already been executed. And Troy's story speaks a lot about what's wrong with the whole system and why innocent people are being executed. And there were a lot of things that I learned about the case and about Troy from knowing him that the public didn't know. And I felt this was a story that needed to be shared with the world so people would know the truth about what really happened and about what goes on, not just in the case of Troy Davis, but in the case of every death row inmate.
So tell us something about yourself. I was talking to your mom, Kavita. You are the middle child.
Yes.
And she said that you were exceptionally smart but introvert, and that you were reading Wall Street Journal when you were only 7 years old. And she said that you were very wise and an old soul. Is that true?
Well, all mothers like to say nice things about their children. Growing up, I was quiet, and I did like to read a lot and learn new things. You know, most of my friends would spend time outdoors or playing sports, but my sport was chess, so another indoor type thing.
You wrote a book about it too.
Yeah, I did. That was my first experience writing a book. But yeah, I would say I was a pretty quiet, pretty well behaved in my opinion.
Has that changed over the years?
Oh, hopefully not. Just quiet, kind of intellectual type kid, and so that's why this whole story was really going out of my comfort zone. I was used to just kind of staying in my house and reading online or reading a book, and here I was going to death row, meeting someone who grew up not in the wealthiest of areas where drugs and gangs and crime were common. So this was like a very eye-opening experience for me because it was just totally different than what I was used to.
And I was actually going to ask you that because I heard again that you were on track on academia, you wanted to go to MIT, but meeting Troy changed your course of life. And at an age, I think you were 15 when I think most teenagers, when I was 15, I wanted to study, but it was Bollywood for me, watching movies and escapism. So at an age we are all looking for escapism. You chose to meet and then be a friend of a person on a death row. Now, do you have any regrets, or did you face any concerns from your family about taking this step?
Well, sometimes I wonder what kind of person I'd be if I'd never met Troy. We always like to think that we'd still be the best version of ourselves, regardless of what choices we may have made. But who we are is the result of our environment, our innate nature, and our experiences. And if I hadn't met Troy, I don't think I would have been as empathetic. I don't think I would have cared as much about human rights. And it wasn't that I didn't care about that before, but when you experience it firsthand, it changes you. And I don't have any regrets. I think, if anything, the only regret was that I didn't learn about Troy sooner.
What was it about Troy that convinced you that he was innocent?
I first met him when I was 15 on death row, and at that time I still didn't know a whole lot about the case. I just knew the bare outline of the facts. Basically that he had been convicted based on 9 eyewitness testimonies, and 7 of those 9 eyewitnesses had recanted. And so, speaking to him, he told us his version of the events, and just it was just kind of a feeling you get, right? That this person, I don't think he did it, but you can't just go off of a feeling. It was over time that when I learned more about the case, I actually went to Savannah and visited the spot where the murder took place, and there's so many things that went on there that made me very strongly doubt that he was guilty. For instance, the parking lot that the murder took place in, there was one witness who was across the street who said she saw Troy Davis shoot the police officer. And we were there during the day. The murder took place around 1 a.m. at night. And we were there during the day, and so I actually stood on the other side of the street and could barely make out who people, my own family members. And so someone was claiming at 1 a.m. at night in a poorly lit area that they could somehow make out.
And I heard they cut the trees down later and put more lights later
too, after
the incident, right?
So it was even more difficult back then. So it's just a combination of meeting him in person, like listening to his version of what actually took place, researching, actually reading through the statements of the witnesses who recanted their testimonies, and then physically going to the site itself. It was a combination of all that convinced me he was innocent.
It's good that you worked at it very analytically, because lot of time who we are is what we see in others, because as a 15-year-old, when you are pretty innocent about life, it is very easy to believe in the innocence of others. So it's good that you use the analytical methodology here. So I have another question for you, that Troy was, from what I read in the book, he was very optimistic.
Right.
He was a big believer in God. He thought till the very last moment he will walk out of there, especially after 4 executions which was with stay order. Do you think that now that Troy was executed, has it shaken your faith in God, or has it made you more realistic or pessimistic in any way?
When he was executed, it was a very disillusioning moment for me. And I wondered, if there is a God, what kind of just God would allow this to happen?
True.
But then I remembered actually the very first time I met Troy, this was only 6 days after his second execution date, and he had come within 90 minutes of execution. And so at this point, he had been behind bars for 19 years and on death row for 17 years. And so I asked him, if you didn't do it, why would God let you be behind bars for almost 20 years? And he said, I don't think God has forsaken me. I think he's just not ready for me to come home yet. Maybe if I had stayed on the streets of Savannah, I would be dead by now, because I know people, I have friends who are dead now, who are on the streets of Savannah. Maybe,
that's amazing.
Maybe something else would have happened. But behind bars, look at how many people I've inspired. I've made hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people know about this case, know about the injustices in the system. I don't see this as God punishing me. I just see this as serving a greater purpose. And so maybe in some way Troy's execution was also to serve a greater purpose. At least that's what I hope.
That's a very interesting way of looking at it as well. But do you ever wonder in some of your moments that you spent so much time with him, you wrote this book, it's like a memoir, what if you were wrong in believing that Troy was innocent? Do you ever wonder about that?
I did wonder, like someone actually asked me, what would you do if Troy was guilty? And that reminded me of, there was actually another execution that took place the exact same day Troy was executed. It was a white supremacist in Texas who had there's a black man who they had tied to the back of his pickup truck and driven the truck and eventually killed him. Yeah, brutal murder. And he felt no remorse at all. So this was someone who was very, very different from Troy. But I think the greatest lesson Troy taught me was that both executions were wrong. Both his execution and the execution of that man were wrong. And so even if Troy wasn't innocent, he still showed me that there is humanity on death row, that innocent people can be executed and have been executed, and as long as we have the death penalty, will continue to be executed. And so regardless of whether he was innocent or not, his execution was wrong. And at the very least, he showed enough doubt that he should not have been executed.
Absolutely. Now, all the proceeds of your book are going to Innocent Project. So tell us a little bit more about that.
So the Innocence Project, it's a non-profit organization, and they work with death row and people wrongfully convicted, and they use DNA evidence to exonerate and free people who are wrongfully convicted. And they also help train law enforcement and lobby for laws and policies to be passed to prevent innocent people from being put behind bars. And so I decided to donate all the money from Remain Free to the Innocence Project because they really embodied Troy's dream. He dreamed one day of a nation without the death penalty and without other Troy Davises. And he said, when I die, I don't want my followers to fade away in sorrow. I want them to get angry and go out and fight for the other Troy Davises. And that's what the Innocence Project does every day. So
where can people buy this book?
So you can buy it on remainfree.com, or you can just search Remain Free on Amazon and find it there.
Okay. So one of Troy's dreams was that after he was released, he wanted to go to different schools and colleges and share his life story. So especially tell people about what can go wrong if you are at the wrong place at the wrong time. Now, in some ways, by writing his book and giving some lectures at colleges, you are carrying on his legacy. So tell us more about that, and if you have any upcoming events in the New England area, so people can come and meet you.
So there is an event on November 14th at MIT. It's free and open to the public. Information on that will be available on remainfree.com. But Troy said that when he was released, because he always believed he would eventually get out.
Yes.
He said he wanted to visit schools because he said that he fell in with the wrong crowd, and it was because he wanted to fit in. He said he wasn't a bad student and he wasn't a bad kid, but he would hang out with the wrong people because he wanted to feel accepted. And he hoped that his story of persevering through 2 decades of death row, of finding faith in God and that helping him survive in those terrible conditions, that would inspire kids who maybe were heading down the same path to rethink their lives. And he said that one thing that I'll always remember about him is that he always believed that the kids who got in trouble at school, who acted out, if you took them away from their friends and just spoke to them one-on-one, you'd see what they're truly passionate about and what they truly care about.
I like the advice that Troy gave you, which was to follow your dreams. And we are glad that you wrote the book, and we wish you all the best. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you.